One. Hello and welcome to the Truett Seminary on the campus of Baylor University. My name is Dale Caffey, and the reason that WISD TV cameras are here today is to cover an event called Pastors for Texas Children. I am so pleased to be with the executive director of that group. This is Dr. Charles Johnson from Fort Worth. You're a pastor in Fort Worth.
I am.
Tell me a little bit about Texas, or this Pastors for Texas Children.
Thank you, Dale. Well, Pastors for Texas Children was started about 18 months ago. Our mission is simple and difficult. We want to mobilize the faith community for public education ministry and advocacy, support for our neighborhood and community schools. We are a statewide organization. We have about 1,000 partners in our organization. Any self-identified faith leader, a pastor, a children's minister, youth minister, elder, deacon, committee chairperson, if you care about educating our children, we want you in our organization. Of course, you know this. Lots of educators are also congregational leaders. Who do we call upon to teach our children Sunday school? The public school teachers. So several years ago, I got convicted about this, and I represented Texas Baptists on the Coalition for Public Schools in Austin. But I came to the conclusion that we need to be not just in Austin, not just during the session, we need to be in every Texas community all year long. And so we're going to every community, large and small. We're getting pastors together and we're recruiting them to be public education supporters.
One of those events is today. You're the keynote speaker of this particular event, and we're about to capture it on video as well. But tell us a little bit about the goals of this organization.
Yeah, Dale, thank you. And thank you to Baylor University, where we're conducting this interview in this beautiful chapel. President Ken Starr heard about our organization. Dean John Englehart, Dean of the School of Education here at Baylor, is a good friend and a good supporter for us. And he told our mission and our ministry to President Starr, and President Starr suggested, let's hold a luncheon. Let's invite area pastors and area educators. So here we are. We have the great room here at Truett Seminary filled for this luncheon today. President Starr is going to address us. I'm going to address us, and hopefully we'll walk out with 150 to 200 new education advocates among clergy.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for what your organization is doing.
Thank you, sir. God bless.
But thank you all once again for taking time out of what I know is a really busy day to join us for what may be the first meeting of education and faith community leaders in Central Texas to discuss a common agenda for supporting strong and equitable education for all of our children. Education and church leaders have a profound impact on communities. They can have a profound impact on communities and government. 50 years ago, a Texas teacher who gave up the schoolhouse for the White House and a dedicated, charismatic preacher came together around the cause of promoting quality education for all children, regardless of color, geography, or economic circumstance. Out of their efforts came the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1964, a national pledge to support public education for all children. And those of us who are in education know the significance for sure of that particular act. It continues on today. Those of you that have heard No Child Left Behind, it is a reincarnation or another set of names for the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which has this long history. The opportunity before us today, 50 years later, is to once again consider how education and church leaders can come together in common cause to better the education of Texas children. Before proceeding further, though, I would like to take a moment to recognize a couple of folks in our audience. Dr. Mike Moses, former commissioner of Texas education here in Texas. I didn't get a chance with the crowd to get around. Is Sue Melton here? She was hoping to be here. She's on the State Board of Education. She's our local representative. We thank, of course, each of them for their service to the, even in their absence in the case of Sue, for their service to the state of Texas and efforts toward helping children in our state. It is now my honor to introduce someone who almost needs no introduction, Baylor President and Chancellor Kenneth W. Starr. Judge Starr and his wife Alice have served Baylor since 2010. Many of you know President Starr's public service as U.S. Solicitor General, arguing cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. Perhaps you know him for his service as Dean of Pepperdine University, as Dr. Moses knows about, Pepperdine University Law School. And surely you know him as a strong leader for Baylor University. Among other priorities, Judge Starr is a strong advocate for Baylor efforts to address challenges facing our community, locally, statewide, and even globally. I know Ken Starr is a man with extraordinary heart for education at all levels, and for children, especially those who seem to be among the most challenged in our communities. Excuse me. Before coming to Baylor, Ken and Alice, his wife Alice, were instrumental in establishing a respite center for autistic children and their families in the Washington, D.C. area. Since coming to Baylor, they have been stalwarts in supporting the efforts led by the School of Education to partner with Baylor Scott and White Health Services, a partnership which provides diagnostic and treatment services for children with developmental disabilities, while at the same time creating opportunities to learn and have service for students and faculty here at Baylor. I have personally appreciated his affirmation of my work with local schools and school leaders. I say this to share with you the sincere care and concern Judge Starr has for our community, for our schools, for children and families, and for efforts to advance all of these. Please join me in welcoming Baylor University's President and Chancellor, Judge Ken Starr.
Thank you. Boy, I jumped up there.
Well, thank you, John. Dean, that was a very gracious introduction. As you can tell, I wasn't expecting it, and thus I jumped up prematurely, but thank you. And let me join Dean Engelhardt in welcoming each of you here. And I'd really like to begin with where Dean Tucker left us in his beautiful invocation. One of the great scenes in Scripture is Jesus remonstrating with the disciples. They're trying to shoo those kids away, right? Y'all get out of here. Well, I don't think they said y'all, but skedaddle in Aramaic. We have learned folks here, so Dean Tucker, perhaps you can guide me to who could translate that into Aramaic, the Lord's human language. And let the little children come to me. And he made that profound and beautiful statement, right? About to such belong. If we want the kingdom, we need to think a little bit more like children. And the innocence and sweetness and the openness and the sense of wonder of children. Then I love the scene where these are adults. It's the Mary and Martha scene. Remember that? So Professor Still, help me. Sometimes I'll say it was Mary, sometimes it was Martha. But you know the scene, right? Someone is doing all the work in the kitchen. And who is sitting at the Lord's feet? Mary. All right. And Martha didn't appreciate that, did she? She was getting all the work done, scurrying about, making sure that there was genuine hospitality. But someone wanted to be a student. Someone wanted to listen and to learn. You'll notice that there was no condemnation for scurrying around and engaging in hospitality, first century hospitality, but rather that there was something noble about sitting at the Master's feet. It wasn't being lazy, it was listening, hopefully with an open mind and an open heart to receive. That's what children are and can be if they're given the opportunity. You know, we have so many debates raging in the country. What's the future of health care? What should we do in the Middle East? The future of Social Security, let's let the shouting match continue. But I think everybody can say we have an absolute, total obligation to our children? What is it that we can do? Now, for those who are very engaged in church schools, I'm not talking about Sunday school, education ministries, God bless you. May those schools do well. May they prosper. May they serve, and may they serve and do kingdom work. But you know the statistics. Tens of millions of little children will never be in a church school. They will never be in any independent school. They will not be in a private school. 90% plus of America's children will be in the public schools. For those who say, well, those are state schools, well, I want to call to the witness stand John Adams. During the formative period when we were really thinking, what do we want this nation to be? We didn't even have a constitution. We had independence and we had a Continental Congress, and we weren't doing too well. And it was in 1785 he wrote this, about education. The whole people must take upon themselves the education of the whole people. Notice the universality of that. Of the whole people, and here it is, and be willing to bear the expenses of it. There it is. There should not be a district of 1 mile square. He was thinking East Coast. Without a school in it. Now listen to this. This is really pivotal. Not founded by a charitable individual, but maintained at the public expense by the people themselves. That was the wise Mr. Adams. And so that voice echoes down the corridors of time, and with all of the issues swirling around public education and its effectiveness and so forth, at least let there be agreement on this proposition. We need to stand by public education to help our teachers and our superintendents. Would our teachers and superintendents, I see several in the room, I work out at Gold's Gym with one. Would our superintendents and teachers please stand? You know, we honor our veterans, and we should. We should also honor our teachers. And one of the things that I know that the pastors for Texas Children are seeking to do is just to encourage pastors in the church community, find ways of encouraging. I love that word, Barnabas. What was so great about Barnabas? Son of encouragement. He was a good speaker, obviously, that we do know, but he was an encourager. And what pastors for Texas Children that you'll hear more about today is eager to do is to find ways to come alongside our dear teachers and to say, we love you. What can we do to pray for you and support you and encourage you? Let me close by paying tribute to someone who changed my life. She died 10 days ago. Her name is Roberta Mahan. She died at the tender age of 97. Roberta taught English at Sam Houston High School. And she would, as teachers do, grab kids by the scruff of the neck, and she made it very clear to me, as Coach Frost had, you have no future in football at this high school. My response was, but Coach, how do you expect me to try to date the head cheerleader if I don't even have a uniform? At least give me a uniform. I'll try to handle the rest. I will always remember words to this effect, Kenneth, you're going to get yourself hurt out there. Now, our quarterback went on to play in the NFL, so I think I got some pretty good advice. When you're slow and you're scrawny and otherwise, all you can do is say, well, Vince Lombardi. You're too young to remember that. So Roberta Mahan, who I returned to Sam Houston High School with, we knew that her end was drawing nigh in September of this last year, 2014. And to see her being honored because her reputation lives on at that little high school. And she grew up on the south side of San Antonio. She came not from means. She married a fellow teacher. She dedicated her entire life to grabbing kids like me by the scruff of the neck and saying, here's what you should consider doing. You have talents, you have gifts. Remember the parable of the talents? We're to use our talents, but first you have to know what those talents are. And frequently, you need a teacher who says, young woman, young man, I think I know you. Or maybe you've had one of those tests that suggest, and I'll always remember being told by Mrs. Mahan, you need to go to Washington, D.C. to go to college. The thought had never occurred to me. You need to, instead of chasing after the head cheerleader who's not going to give you the time of day, concentrate on your academics and concentrate on debate. You can talk. Why don't you get involved in the debate team? Never had occurred to me. How many of us can tell that kind of story about a teacher? And maybe it was a Sunday school teacher. I've had wonderful Sunday school teachers. But we do know this, the Sunday school teachers have those precious children for an hour. How many hours, how many days do our school teachers have for those children? So let us gather around and say to our teachers, we love you, but we also love our education system. And it will not do for this great state to continue to decline in the support of education. We can do better. And I think if our Lord were here, he would say, let the little children come to us. And you should be concerned and be committed about the future of America's school children. God bless you. Thank you for being here. And you're always welcome to Truett Seminary that bears the name George Washington Truett. We love that. What a powerful voice he was for Texas Baptist life, but also for education. I'll always, I didn't mean to say this, but Dean Tucker, I'm going to go ahead and say it. When he gathered, and so many members of Congress, when he was the head of the Southern Baptist Convention, and when he gathered to give a speech in Washington, D.C. on the steps of the Capitol in 1921, much of the United States Congress was there to hear what he had to say. And those were days of strong denominationalism. People really identified with their denomination. I leave to others to comment on this post-denominational world. But he spoke beautifully out of the Baptist tradition in favor of liberty, liberty of conscience, religious freedom for all persons, and he spoke to my fellow Christians. I think we can say in a pluralistic society, my fellow Christians and our fellow friends of liberty and friends of civilization and those things that we hold dear, the right of every individual to, hopefully with the help of a teacher and by God's grace, to plot his or her own course, to say, this is where I think the good Lord is leading me. These are my gifts, these are my talents. I'm so thankful for that teacher who helped me decide where it is by God's grace that I want to go. Let's rally around our teachers, our educators, our administrators, and tell lovingly our duly elected public officials, let's love them. Yes, do we want them to perform better? Of course we do. But let's ask that basic question, how can we help? God bless you.
Judge Starr stimulated for me, I hope he stimulated for you, many thoughts about education in your own life. I've been a teacher educator for well over 30 years, and that means a whole lot of teachers and I have come in contact, or those who would be teachers have come in contact. The one thing I've always told them is teaching is a difficult profession. It will test your mettle as a human being and as a Christian. And what you need to do is remember that one teacher in your life that made a difference for you. When the going gets tough, think about them and how what they devoted to help you become who you are today. I believe that's carried many of our teachers forward when they might have given up otherwise. Well, finally, it's my pleasure to invite Dr. David Anthony to the podium to introduce Reverend Charles Foster Johnson, Charlie Johnson, who will lead this afternoon's conversation. Having served as a school leader for over 25 years, and listen to this, in small, rural, suburban, property poor, property wealthy, low student growth, fast student growth school districts. He's done it all. Dr. Anthony is well versed in the challenges of public schools, as well as in knowing the marvelous difference that public education can make in the lives of children from all backgrounds. Dr. Anthony currently serves as the executive director of the Raise Your Hand Texas, an organization dedicated to advocating both for public schools and for responsible, innovative educational leadership. I can think of no one better positioned to start off our conversation by introducing Dr. Johnson.
It's a tremendous honor to be here today to see this group coming together for a common cause. I heard President Starr speak, and I told Reverend Johnson I was just going to get up and have the benediction because there was no point in him speaking. It has been said. But you will find out in a few minutes Charles Johnson has never had a loss for words. Now, I wanted to make one comment because you hear a lot about the government schools. Now, I'm a recovering public educator, 37 years in public education, 24 years as superintendent in the state of Texas, and yes, I've been in all sizes, from north to south, and all different types of schools. And I've been in churches in all those districts. And I've been a Sunday school teacher, and back in the day, the training union teacher, and I've taught adults, and I've taught children, and I've been there time every Sunday and Sunday night, and then Sunday morning in small groups, and I mean, you know how it's all changed a bit. But you know what I used to see when I'd go to churches, and I mean even as late as last Sunday? There were teachers and principals there. I didn't know that we were in mutually exclusive groups. I didn't realize there were Christians and educators. I thought there were Christians. And then if you look at how many educators are engaged in churches as teachers, as serving, as believers, then I don't understand the divide and then why we allow that allegation to occur. Many times we simply remain silent far too long instead of taking an active role like Charles Johnson. I got to know him 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, at the last legislative session when he was eloquently testifying before the Senate Education Committee, and then it was on vouchers, and he expressed himself so well on a panel, and then some of the senators were questioning him, and the chairman was questioning him pretty aggressively, but with a smile on his face, and so Charles was explaining exactly why vouchers were not the answer. And so he was asked, well, Reverend Johnson, are you speaking for God? And he said, Senator, I never speak for God. I'm just speaking for 5,500 Baptists. That's exactly what happened in the room. It shut the hearing down. It was roaring laughter. It relieved the tension, but the message was made. Charles Johnson was born in Alabama. And I'm not going to tell you what year because he is a very young man. But you know, when I looked at the really important stuff about a resume or bio, it's what people think and convention says you should share with people about what's important and how they judge you by your pedigree. And so it's really important. So all resumes will look relatively the same. What you have to do is look what other people say about the people who the resume is actually trying to describe. But you know, he's married to Jane Powers Corley of Lubbock, Texas. He has 3 children. He has 3 grandchildren, which to me is really important because I have 2 children and 5 grandchildren, and I know what has really taken preeminence in my life. But you know what his major was in his baccalaureate degree? Political science. Man, great preparation for a preacher, but definitely great preparation for what he's doing right now. As I went through and looked at all the years he served in all the multiple churches, he has been in long-term relationships in churches. He's helped some in interims. But you know what I kept seeing was the word founder. He didn't go somewhere and just keep the status quo. He was trying to create new. Founder and executive director of Pastors for Texas Children. He was a founder of a culturally multicultural Anglo-Latino congregation in San Antonio. He was the founder of the Mulberry School, a weekday child care ministry. He sponsored 2 new churches. He was founder of the Slam Dunk for Life, a summer basketball camp for kids in urban areas to help them be engaged in a time when idle hands become the devil's workshop. He has been involved at every level with Boy Scouts, with adults, helping those in need no matter where he found them. I found that in his continuing education, he did some meditation, He did mediation training. Mediation training. And I said, that's great. Charlie is a quality leader in a time of peace, creating peace. Then he went to the Buckley School of Public Speaking, and we all know that he is a great communicator. And then he went to the National Security Seminar, Army War College, because it is a battle, isn't it, Charlie? Preparing for battle in the legislature. So his interests are all over. I'm impressed from the fact he is an Eagle Scout. He loves fiction, poetry, camping, backpacking, cooking, film, hunting, running, ranching. He became an unwitting star, unintentional star of the documentary, The Texas Promise. If you haven't seen that documentary, that movie, they're really pushing it for the South by Southwest Film Conference. He's a star. They found him. God gave those who have no political voice in the state of Texas Charles Foster Johnson, so that they could have a beautiful, melodic, resonating voice that people listen to. He has lived and served in Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas, but not Louisiana, where I'm from. And it was either God said, Charlie's not ready for those people, or those people not ready for Charlie. I'm pretty sure it was the latter, having been from Louisiana. Charlie spent a lot of time serving children. His faith transcends all boundaries. He takes his faith where all the people are, not where the media or cameras tend to locate, but where he is most comfortable, among those who need spiritual, physical, emotional, and intellectual support. It's a privilege to introduce Charles Foster Johnson today, but it's a greater privilege for me to introduce Charlie as a new friend and colleague engaged in the Lord's work. Charlie Johnson.
Dr. Anthony, thank you so much. Be careful when you email a biography to somebody who's introducing you. We're appreciative of David Anthony and Raise Your Hand Texas, which is one of our most important education advocacy organizations, and the support, financial and spiritual support that you give us is strategic for us. Judge Starr, thank you. The reason we are here in this room at this hour is because of you. When Baylor University's president invites you for lunch, we show up, and here we are. And we are in close fellowship today. I love the way we've all made room for each other. I love the way, Dean Tucker, that you and your colleagues here at the great Truett Seminary have made room for us. A seminary of this prestige always has events happening, important events, things that are going on. And this seminary and this faculty made adjustment and made accommodation for this event, Judge Starr. And you can be proud of them. I know you are. We're proud of them and grateful for us all being in this room. All right. If you're Baptist, raise your hand. Well, it's a Baptist university. What do you figure? If you're Methodist, raise your hand. And we got a bunch of Methodists. Very, very good. Wonderful. Lutheran. Any Lutherans? Beautiful. Great. Roman Catholic. Wonderful. Pentecostal. Or, yeah, Pentecostal. Lift your hands, brother. Wave them. There you go. Presbyterians, wonderful, great. Well, we've got an ecumenical movement right here in the room. And I'm leaving out a bunch. Who else? Christian Disciples of Christ. Disciples of Christ, non-denominational. Nazarene. Yeah, beautiful. Who did we miss? Who did we miss? Church of Christ, indeed. Church of Christ, raise your hand. Oh, we ought to have more than that here. We got to work on the Church of Christ. Delighted that we're all here. There's a couple of other very special people that come to my mind, and brothers and sisters of other denominations indulge us. The current president of the Baptist General Convention of Texas, Kathy Hillman, is here. Kathy, raise your hand. We're glad you're here. Thank you for all of your service. And then the outgoing president and PTC board member, Jeff Johnson, is here. Jeff, where are you? Raise your hand. We're grateful for all of your service. We're going to ask you 2 or 3 times, brothers and sisters. Dean Englehart and Baylor University Judge Starr and all his staff and this great school have provided this lunch for us. But we're going to ask you to give back, and that is fill out this form at your table. Give the gift of yourself. If you would give us your name and address, an email address and phone number, that would be an incredible encouragement. Judge Starr used the word. You are giving the gift of yourself today. You came through inclement weather. You are pastors and ministers. You're faith leaders and educators. And you have 10 other things vying for your attention at this very hour. You're thinking about some of those things right now. We're going to get you out before 1:30. But thank you. If you would give us the additional gift, even while I'm speaking, if you would fill that out and leave it at your table, we would appreciate that very, very much. Several years ago, I was interim pastor at Broadway Baptist Church. We've got wonderful representation from Broadway Baptist Church. Brent Beasley is the pastor there, and Fran Patterson, Jareen Swift, Dan Freemeyer, and other lay leaders. And I got a call from Susie Painter. Susie at that time was the executive director of the Christian Life Commission of the Baptist General Convention of Texas, and she asked me if I would represent Texas Baptists on something called the Coalition for Public Schools. And I said, sure, not really knowing what I was getting myself into. And shortly thereafter, I became convicted about public education, about the necessity for it, the moral necessity, and about, as Judge Starr said, the fact that we can do better in the state of Texas. And Dr. Moses, a very enlightening thing happened to me. I'm a pastor, so I was used to making visits. You go knock on doors. That's what you do as a pastor. You set up conversations. You talk to people about your mission. And so I asked them, give me a list of legislators. In fact, give me the toughest legislators. Doesn't matter to me. I'm used to boneheaded deacons, so I can talk to a state representative or a state senator who's not crazy about public education. The first 3 or 4 visits, I walked in and I said, my name is Charles Johnson, and I'm representing the Coalition for Public Schools. The young man, the young woman behind the reception desk did not even look up. Leave your material. I'll make sure the representative gets it. Well, my goodness, I wasn't used to being ignored like that. And so I went to the rotunda, I sat down on a bench, and I sort of breathed a half prayer. Lord, what on earth am I doing wrong? And then in my spirit, the Spirit said, you're not representing the Coalition on Public Schools. Tell them who you represent. I walked in the next legislative office and I said, my name is Charles Johnson and I'm a pastor in Fort Worth, Texas. Up comes the face. The young man stands up, comes up from around the desk, extends his hand. It's a pleasure to have you, Reverend. Can I get you a cup of coffee? How about a bottle of water? Stay right there. The representative will want to speak with you. And that was very enlightening to me. because that young man knows that a minister stands before a congregation and a congregation votes. And from that point on, I started conveying and communicating more accurately who I represented. Education is a gift from God. It is a basic human right. Judge Starr has said that with great articulation today. I agree with Dr. Anthony. We could have the invitation. And there's a passage in the 2nd chapter of Genesis that's convicted me over the months. I never had preached it before I started getting into this education advocacy. Pastors, follow me. Perhaps you've not preached it. God places the human in a garden because food is a basic human right. No one would disagree. Jeremy Everett is here at this luncheon, and the wonderful Texas Hunger Initiative housed here at Baylor University. Every single human being on the planet deserves to eat. You may eat, the Bible says. You go down to the last part of chapter 2 in Genesis, the gift of love, of relationship. God brings a partner to the human because it is not good for the human to be alone. Relationship is a basic right. Every single child deserves to be loved. But in the middle, God brings all the animals to the human to see what the human would name them. What is that naming impulse? What is that naming enterprise? It's education. It's teaching a child to name her world. I have a 1-year-old little grandbaby girl, and her mama, who is a public school teacher in San Angelo, Texas, holds up a spherical object, and little Nora says, "Ball," and points to a 4-legged creature in the pasture, cow. Tree. And that is what every single teacher in this state is doing. The will and work of God in helping children name their world. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it. Walker Percy calls us symbol mongers. We participate in symbols. And in order to subdue the earth, we have to categorize it and classify it, and that's what education is all about. So women and men of God, our charge is to come alongside public educators, education for all our children. All means all. Every child that shows up at the First Baptist Church of Commerce, Texas, or the First Baptist Church of Palestine, Texas, is taken in, no questions asked, no questions about pedigree or parentage or economics or background or skin color. Every child is unconditionally accepted in every Methodist and Church of Christ Catholic, every church of every denomination. Every child that shows up at Bonnie Kane's school, Superintendent Kane of the Great Waco Independent School District, that child is taken in regardless of that child's needs, regardless of that child's disabilities, regardless of that child's supported home. That child is taken in and surrounded with superactive love. It is a spiritual enterprise. So, when we are told, as some of our politicians are telling us, that we need to introduce market principles into our public trust, that is wrong. Market principles do not guide the congregational life of the great churches that are here. You spend extravagantly on the least of these in your midst because you are doing God's work. The local church and the local school are the two remaining institutions protecting and preserving God's common good. What if, pastors and teachers, what if we could facilitate an incredible, powerful partnership between pastors and principals, between churches and schools, and form that incredible dynamic duo on behalf of the 5.1 million children we serve in the state of Texas?
Judge Starr was too polite to tell us where we rank nationally in public education today. Somebody take a guess. We are in fact 47th in this great country, the most prosperous state in the Union, the Texas miracle, we're told. And we are near dead last in per pupil spending. Money's not the entire answer, but the answer will not happen without proper funding. What is the only episode we have out of the life of Christ in his boyhood? Pastors, tell me. Sitting at the feet of his teachers, listening to them, asking them questions. The only event in the life of Christ that the Spirit of God deemed worthy enough to preserve for the marvelous narrative record is education. It is a profoundly spiritual enterprise, pastoral ministry, inherently spiritual. And so when Susie asked me to represent the Coalition for Public Schools in the 4th legislative session, I said, Susie, I'll do anything you ask me to do, and if you know Susie Painter, that's the only answer you can give to Susie Painter. But I said, we're not getting the job done. And I refreshed her memory about $5.4 billion stripped from public education in 2011. And this was right at the eve of the 2013 session. It was in the fall of 2012, and Chairman Aycock of the House Education Committee had already said, Pastor, we're not going to get all those cuts restored this next session. I mean, I'm not a clairvoyant. I can't tell you exactly what the legislature will do, but I'm afraid we're only going to get to about $3.4 billion, about 60%. When you're told, as I read in the Waco paper, by the way, not long ago, by a certain business leader in our state, that almost all of the education cuts have been restored, incorrect, wrong. Well, I'm not supposed to say lie, Geraldine, so I'm just going to say incorrect. Wrong. Since when, pastors, has 60% of your mission and ministry budget been almost all? And in fact, Chairman Aycock was right. About $3.4 billion was restored. Now I've got some good news. It came out just a couple of hours ago. Comptroller Hager tells us we have $113 billion to work with in our state legislature because we have the good fortune of sitting on huge oil and gas reserves. The economy in Texas is pretty good, and we have a generativity and an abundance right now. So the question is, what are we going to do with that money? Are we going to make good on John Adams' great vision, the public trust, an enterprise that every single one of us are responsible for, by restoring those education cuts and by adjusting for 2015 dollars? Probably every educator in the room, every superintendent in the room, Dr. Moses and Dr. Anthony could educate all of us. Probably it's at a $7 billion level. We've got the money to do it. Do we have the will to do it? I'm looking at people who can answer that question. And I'm looking at people who, with a phone call or a visit or a handwritten note, could change a state representative's mind. Ministry only is not enough, my friends. We need to take the extra step of advocacy. Jesus did, and we do. You're wrapping your arms around your local school. You're giving that teacher the gratitude and the thanksgiving that he rightfully deserves. That teacher is working impossible hours at low pay, and providing not only for the educational needs of those children, but the social and human needs too. Actually, food and love also, not just education. And I got a call at the end of last week from a superintendent in Archer City, Texas, that told me about a school teacher. A little boy in her class showed up. Been cold in Texas the past week, hadn't it? Little fella showed up without a coat. She got him a coat from the local church, but she found out that he didn't have any heat in his home. But he does now because of that teacher. 61% of those 5.1 million children in Texas in our public education system are on free and reduced lunch. They're poor. They're the least of these. Dr. Kane, how many children in Waco are on free and reduced lunch? Where are you, Bonnie? What? 91% in the shadow of this great university, these great churches. And so, Dean Englehart, I don't take very kindly to our politicians spending all their energy and millions of dollars in a legislative process trying to privatize this basic public trust. They do it for a reason, and the reason is our children do not have us speaking for them. The wealthy corporations have people speaking for them that want a piece of the Texas education pie, $50 billion biennium. And now we have CEOs of corporations out of New York and Los Angeles and Turkey saying, on the behalf of our stakeholders, let's get a piece of that pie. Pastors, we need your help. Our children need your voice. You give a cup of cold water in the name of Christ in the hallways of the school nearest your church, and then out of that relationship, advocate for full funding for public education at 2015 levels to the 150 state representatives and 31 state senators, and they will listen to you. They will give you platform. They will give you deference. And here's how you will leave that conversation. You will stand a little taller, and you will say to that state rep, I'm looking forward to talking to you again, Representative, and holding him accountable, because he laid his hand on a Bible before God and he swore to uphold the great Constitution of the state of Texas, a central provision of which is, Judge Starr knows this, a free and appropriate education for all children. We can do better. Those of us in this room can do better. I'm going to ask you to do two things. Call that principal when you get back home. She won't know what hit her. She's going to get 6, 8 phone calls. How can we help? When public school teachers spend $500 to $1,000 out of their own pocket a year on school supplies, friends, is there not something wrong with that picture? Can the Methodist Church in that community take up every single piece of construction paper that that elementary school needs? Of course you can. You be the construction paper church. Jeremy Everett and Texas Hunger Initiative helping us with backpack programs for poor kiddos that need a nutritional meal on weekends. Why aren't we performing adequately on these tests? What if our kids show up hungry on Monday morning? They hadn't had anything to eat all weekend long. Let's provide food security for our children. Teacher appreciation, restoring teaching to the God-given stature and nobility that it deserves. Pastor, when you get your teacher to the altar, bring your teachers to the altar. When you lay hands on them and have prayer, And when those children see the way that your congregation is honoring teachers, my, that's a powerful witness right there. And it will filter back to the home. Dr. Moses just gave me an astonishing figure. 70% of the people in our state don't have of the voters in our state. 70% of the voters in our state do not have school-age children. I don't let anybody say in my hearing, my kids are grown, I've already paid those taxes. And don't you allow that either. Jana and I gladly pay our property taxes for the education of our neighbors' children because our future depends on it. But our children need us to be voices and advocates. I believe we have enough talent, enough articulation, enough connectedness, enough platform. When a group of Dallas pastors, George Mason and some of his colleagues in Dallas, penned an op-ed, the Dallas paper, most widely read newspaper in the state, one of the great papers of our nation, published that op-ed. Pastors in the Waco district, send that op-ed to the Waco paper. Dr. Charles Luke penned a piece for the Houston paper. They published it. David Curry, a piece for the San Angelo paper. They published it. We're going to get op-ed pieces in all the papers throughout our state. Be a voice on behalf of our children. I'm going to draw this to a close. Did I mention that I need your name, address, email, phone number? Please be generous to do that. No obligation, but please be generous to do that. We're going to see a little 4-minute clip of a film that is about to be released. The film is entitled The Texas Promise. Dr. Anthony misspoke. I'm certainly not a star of that film, but our school children are, and our school teachers are.
My name's Ariel, and I want to go to college after I finish school to be a dental hygienist.
I want to go to college to be an airplane technician.
When I grow up, my dream job is to be a teacher.
Become either a veterinarian or a physical therapist.
Forensics or a psychology.
I know I want to attend a university in Texas. I plan on going to college if I get through high school.
I want to explore the world and write in some journal and show it to my boss.
After high school, I plan on being an electrician.
I want to become an anesthesiologist.
At the moment, I'm not quite sure what college I want to go to, but those are my goals.
Where we stand today at almost 11 o'clock in the morning, I'm having a hard time figuring out how we get to the point where we restore the $5 billion that we took from our school children last session.
Article 7, Section 1 starts by saying a general diffusion of knowledge being essential to the preservation of the liberties and rights of the people, comma. That is the reason we have public schools. That's the why. Literally everything else is the how.
Our social contract that we have with each other as citizens is that we will secure the collective welfare of our citizenry. We've always had that since the beginning of our democracy. Early on, it was determined that if we're going to have a stable and self-sustaining democratic order, we've got to educate our children. Education is at the core of the common good.
We have to understand that there are proposals floating around that could drastically change the face of public education. And it's important for people to know what's at stake. Otherwise, they'll look up one day and those public schools that they've always counted on will have transmorphed into something very different that they are not going to want.
It disturbs me greatly to see people trying to destroy public education, and make no doubt about it, they are trying to destroy public education.
I support good education, first and foremost, and education for the child. What I don't support are failing schools.
I object to the whole notion of a failing school, rather than saying, gee, maybe the cuts that we made to public schools have hobbled their ability to get every kid to meet the academic standards.
There are 5 million children, and 3 of them live with me, and they're all waiting for somebody in Austin, Texas to stand up for them and uphold the Constitution.
Not geothermal. Where does thermal come from?
The most important gift of all is knowledge, because nobody can take it away from you. And teachers offer that to you.
It's the opposite to what? What angle are we starting with? What's our reference angle? What angle are you starting with?
We have to be that opportunity for students and their families so that they can realize whatever dreams they have. And also generationally change the face of not only that family, but then our region, our state, and our nation.
It is the single most transformative, publicly provided benefit to our community that can truly make a difference in how a community is going to progress in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
The trouble with schools is that it costs money, and it's public monies, and the payoff doesn't come until 20 years down the road. That's where leadership comes in. That's where a growing understanding across the board of what does the 21st century represent? What does it mean?
Vanessa Roth is the director of this documentary. She won an Oscar for documentary filmmaking in 2008, a very powerful storyteller. You can show that film in your community, and we'll give you the contact. It's very reasonable. It's a very easy thing to do. Everybody in Texas needs to see this film. Some of our nation's leaders are on Mount Rushmore. But we all have a personal Mount Rushmore. Mrs. Kingery, Mrs. Parrish, Mrs. White, Mrs. Pompadour, Mrs. Barwick, Mrs. Pedersen are on my personal Mount Rushmore. Because alongside my mama, my elementary school teachers taught me to name my world. Our teachers are doing that with our precious children. Let the children come to me, our leader told us. So let's go help that happen.
I'm very happy that they are working to mobilize on behalf of public education. Our public schools have over 5 million children enrolled in a state of 26 million people. And while we give honor to how parents choose to educate their children, whether it be charter schooling, parochial schooling, private schooling, our public schools are where we must get the job done and where we have to be successful if our state's going to prosper. So I think this group coming together to support public education is a great thing, and I want to be supportive of that effort.
Let's get everybody together in the community, and churches bring such social capital, as the sociologists say. So let's get everyone together to really focus on how can we all pull together to educate our children. It's as simple as that.
We believe that the faith community has to be involved in the lives of children, particularly in Waco and the surrounding areas where poverty and challenge is part of their lives. And the support community for the teachers and the superintendents and parents who are trying so hard to get our kids educated so they can flourish in the community can only happen when the whole community is involved. And we think it's very critical that the pastors and the local churches help our kids.
We're overwhelmed with the response that as superintendents in public schools that we have received. We just heard about the Pastors for Public Education just a couple of months ago, and it was like an idea. Let's see if we could get together locally in each of our school districts, maybe could bring some pastors just to hear more about this organization. And it just kind of like mushroomed from that. And more we're excited to come, and we're certainly thankful to Baylor University and to be our host, and it certainly matches their mission as well. And So we're just really just encouraged and excited. We begin a new legislative session, and we see this happening. We know the word will continue to spread about supporting our public school students.
There are two great institutions in communities, schools and churches. And they are the natural alliance of coming together for what's best for communities. What's best for communities is best for kids. What's best for kids is best for educators and churches to work together.
What if every church, took what little spot that they could? You don't have to solve all the problems again, but you can do something small. Send a few people over there, and imagine what if every church did that. Imagine the impact that we could have in our community here in Waco, but also across the state. It'd be a great picture of what the church is supposed to do, to represent the goodness of God to the local community there. So that's what we're hoping happens across the state.
We know that parents connect with their community through their school and through their church, and to see Pastor Johnson's work and the superintendents and the education community across Waco represented here like it is today, good things will happen for children. If legislators, when they go home, if they hear about legislation that should be passed or shouldn't be passed, they act on it when it comes from their citizens at home. When they hear from state-based organizations and they're from West Texas, we can give them information, but we're not their constituents. What Charlie Johnson and Parents for Texas Children are doing is they're going to where the kids live, and those parents and those business leaders are hearing about the impact on public education, the impact public education has on the future of this state, the economy, quality of life, and they then talk with their legislators. When it's a personal issue with personal voters and constituents, it's a powerful message. So what they're doing is exactly what has to be done if Texas is going to be represented in Austin by legislators who go back home and live among their peers.
The group that's in that room next to us, the pastors in our community, know their community better than anybody. We desperately need their help to know what we can do to make our community better. And Prosper Waco starts at the grassroots, understanding our communities first.
All of us, most of us, are members of some congregation, and are active in our faith. In fact, many of us who are doing public work are moving out of their own personal faith, or at least I can speak for myself there. But for the pastors to come forward and unite behind speaking on behalf of the children in this state is just, there's almost this sense of, oh, why didn't we think of this before? This is perfect. But it's not just thinking of it. Obviously, Charlie Johnson's working very, very hard to pull it all together and provide significant leadership.
I had 4 new grandchildren who were adopted out of the state system. They actually became part of the family on National Adoption Day, and they are in public schools. So even though I'm not a public school parent, I am a public school grandparent, and I am passionate about their education. I've seen what they've lacked, and I know what they can do. And I'm very hopeful that through the lobbying of Texas Baptists and other pastors, that we can begin to really restore some funding that needs to be restored.